267. What we left off with last time was what to do when you're stuck outside of town and Shabbos is coming in. And we dealt with how to deal with all of that, as well as ways to work out what to do about carrying, when you're stuck. And that was the thing about going less than 2 meters at a time and all those kinds of solutions. And an important principle that we saw was that the rabbis were willing to make compromises in a situation where it could involve monetary loss. You're here for this one, right?
No.
Okay. So this is the important takeaway from last week. That the rabbis were sometimes, it's recorded on YouTube like this one, the rabbis were willing to make compromises in cases where there's monetary loss, because there's a principle that people panic when it comes to losing money. And when a person starts to panic, they would be willing even to break Shabbos because they panic that they're going to lose money. So therefore the rabbi said, okay, we are willing to relax the rules a little bit. We'll permit certain rabbinic prohibitions, permit them, so that you do it this way and that you don't end up just going and breaking Shabbos according to the Torah. So it's not a general thing that they relax it, but in those kinds of situations, and we'll see that kind of thing coming up as well. The rabbis didn't feel that people would meet the requirements of halakha, so they sometimes felt that the correct way was to compromise. Gave a whole Shabbos shir on that once, where sometimes what we say is, let's compromise so people will at least do something, and sometimes we say, no, there's no compromise at all. So, but this is one of the situations that they did. So, and we saw as well, a person stuck outside of town, so he's asking his non-Jewish friend to carry stuff for him, or he's getting his donkey to carry it, or he's asking a child to do something on his behalf, all that kind of thing. Now, chapter 267, davening Erev Shabbos. So, as we see, the way the Shulchan Aruch is structured, we pointed this out before, is the way that the Shulchan Aruch is structured is not like the Rambam. The Rambam's halachot are structured conceptually. First, you've got the foundational halachot, and you've got all the main principles, then you've got the details and divided up according to categories. The Shulchan Aruch is not written conceptually, but practically. So the order that it follows is the order in which you would be doing all the stuff. So now we've spoken about what to do when you're stuck outside town, Erev Shabbos, and whatever else. But now we're speaking about, okay, what to do when you're in Shul, Erev Shabbos, and we're going into Shabbos. So he starts by saying that in Mincha, Erev Shabbos, there's no tachanun. And the kind of reason for that is because it's close to Shabbos, and since it's close to Shabbos, we don't say tachanun. Now the question they ask is, well, what if you do an early mincha? You can do a 1:30 p.m. mincha. So is that really close to Shabbos? The answer is yeah, it's still close enough to Shabbos. Now the principle is, if that's approaching Shabbos, or in fact any kind of festival, we don't do it the afternoon before. And the Mishna Brura points out that this has ramifications on benching as well. When it comes to benching, you always introduce it with a psalm, either Shir Hamalot or Al Naharot Bavel. And it follows the exact same rule as Tachanun. If this is a prayer service at which we would say Tachanun, we say Al Naharot Bavel. If we would not say Tachanun, we say Shir Hamalot. So if you would have a meal Friday afternoon, you say Shir Hamalot before the benching, because that's the kind of indication. Second halacha, we daven Mariv earlier than we usually do during the week. And the reason for that is because people accept Shabbos through the davening. We saw it's Baruch Hu or Mizmor Shir or something like that. And therefore, when you daven a little bit earlier, we bring in Shabbos a little bit earlier, and that's what we've seen as well. There's a mitzvah to bring in Shabbos early.
Why aren't we talking about Kabbalat Shabbat?
So why aren't we talking about Kabbalat Shabbat? Because Kabbalat Shabbat came pretty much after the Shulchan Aruch. Not too long after, but it came after.
Oh.
Yeah. Kabbalat Shabbat is one of the newer innovations in Jewish life, and what is startling about it is that it was accepted absolutely universally. Go to any community in the world, they do Kabbalat Shabbat.
So and who put that together?
That was the Kabbalists of Tzfat. Arizal, Rav Shlomo Levi Alkabetz.
And the Ashkenazim took it on?
Everyone took it on. Everyone in the whole world. Yemenites, you name it.
Sure.
Yeah, interesting, huh? Yeah. So if you want an example of a revolutionary minhag that swept the world and was accepted, Kabbalat Shabbat's your example. So that's why we daven earlier, because we want to accept Shabbat through our prayers. And he says you can accept Shabbat from Plag HaMincha, which is that the time period we've discussed. It's between the earliest time for the latest Mincha and sunset. It's like an hour and a quarter of halachic hours before sunset, which in Cape Town now is like 6:30ish. So that's the earliest time you can light candles and daven Ma'ariv. And
Have we
yeah,
done the halachot of lighting the candles?
yes, we have. But if you've got any questions, I'm happy to field them.
Go forward.
Okay. So now, and the idea as well is that you daven pretty much from Plag HaMincha. You start davening, you daven Ma'ariv, you accept Shabbat, you go home and you eat supper. Right? So the idea is to remember, in those days also they didn't have drosha on a Friday night or things like that. You go home and eat. Then Hashkivenu, that we say at Ma'ariv every night, and we say Shabbos as well, has a different conclusion, as we know. Usually we end it by saying Shomer Amo Yisrael La'ad, protect your nation Israel forever. But Kabbalat Shabbat, we go, or Friday night, we go, Betzel Kanafecha Tastirenu, Ufros Aleinu Sukat Shalom Aleinu, V'al Yerushalayim Yirecha, Baruch Ata Hashem, Hapore Sukat Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Amo Yisrael, V'al Yerushalayim. It's a different one. So why is it that we have that different saying? Because we don't need protection. We don't need to ask Hashem for protection on Shabbos. Shabbos itself is a protection for us. So this instead of saying spread your peace over us, is saying how Hashem does spread peace over us and over Yerushalayim. And then the Mishna Brura brings that our custom is to say V'shamru v'nei Yisrael. Right, so again, it's one of the things that isn't mentioned in Shulchan Aruch. Presumably it came later. On Yom Tov, Vayedaber Moshe et Moedei Hashem. On Rosh Hashanah, Tiku b'chodesh Shofar. Yom Kippur, Ki b'yom hazeh. So in other words, the verse or verses relevant to the day, that's what we do right before the Kaddish, right before the Amidah. Good, that's chapter 267. Chapter 268 is if you make a mistake in the Shabbat Ma'ariv. So the first halakha is that we say Vayechulu in the Ma'ariv itself. So we actually end up saying Vayechulu on a Friday night 3 times. We say it in our private Amidah. We all say it together after the Amidah. And then you say it in Kiddush.
Kiddush, yeah.
So what's the idea of Vayechulu? That the Gemara says, whoever says Vayechulu in their prayers, it's like they are a partner with Hashem in creation. And nevertheless, if you didn't say it, you don't go back to the Amidah. So if you skipped that paragraph and you went on with the rest of Ma'ariv, that's still considered a valid Ma'ariv, but it's something you're supposed to add, but it doesn't disqualify your Ma'ariv if you leave it out. Certainly for us, the Mishnah Brura adds, because we say Vayechulu in Kiddush anyway. And then, and he just goes into some of the technicalities of how we pronounce some of the words and whatever. Normally that's covered in, if you understand how to say the brachot, you pace it appropriately, in a way that makes sense. Now, this is an interesting one. If you make a mistake, and instead of doing the Shabbos davening, you start doing the weekday davening, which is, I think, something that everyone does sooner or later. Doing the Amidah, Baruch Ata Hashem Hakel HaKadosh, Ata Chonein La'adam Dat. So you stop and you say, whoops, didn't do that right. So what do? The halacha is, you finish the bracha that you're on, and then go to the Shabbos davening.
From that point.
Yeah, so in other words, it could be, if you're really a bit scattered and whatever else, especially happens to people who don't normally daven from a siddur, you find yourself in Rafa'inu, which means you've already done like 3 or 4 of the extra ones. Now you're in Rafa'inu, so what do? The answer is, so you say Rafa'inu. you finish Rafa'enu, Baruch Hashem, Rafa'echa le'amo Yisrael, then you go Ataki Dashtem Yom Shvil Yishmecha. You go back to the laws of Shabbos. And the reason for this is that actually it's not intrinsically problematic to daven the weekday Amidah on Shabbos. There's nothing un-Shabbostic about asking Hashem for healing and prosperity and blessing and Mashiach and all of the things that we ask Hashem for and wisdom. It's not intrinsically problematic. And we could make a case that just like on Rosh Chodesh, you have the regular Amidah with an addition for Rosh Chodesh. You can make a case that we should have the regular Amidah with an addition for Shabbos. However, now here's an interesting one. Because of the honor of Shabbos, the rabbis did not put you to trouble. And they made one middle bracha for Shabbos instead of the 13 middle brachas. And therefore, you don't need to say the whole thing. Now, I once went to Rabbi David Goldfein. I said, I don't understand. We do one little bracha for Shabbos, the Amidah. The Amidah is drastically reduced. It's cut to a third because the rabbis didn't want to make us, didn't want to push us, didn't want us to have to work so hard on Shabbos. They wanted to give us a break. They wanted to give us a davening break on Shabbos. So then why? I'll ask the question on Shabbos day. Psukei de Zimra on Shabbos day is like 3 times the length of that of a weekday. So if you want to cut down the davening across the board. If you're going to make more davening across the board. But to say, we're cutting down the Amidah so we don't put people out, but we're now making a lot more Psukei de Zimra. Surely if you want to cut, you cut from the peripherals first. Don't cut from the main and add on to the peripherals. That was my question. Maybe you could say the same with Kabbalat Shabbat as well. Is that, if we cut down on Ma'ariv and the Ma'ariv Amidah, so why is it now cool to just add on a whole new section if we should be cutting down? So Rabbi David, if I recall correctly, and I asked this question a long time ago, if I recall correctly, he said, perhaps it's the difference of intensity. In other words, Kabbalat Shabbat, Psukei de Zimra is a much more relaxed part of the service. We're going longer or shorter, that's not the issue. The issue is the Amidah, when you have the pressure of standing in front of Hashem. It was at that intense moment that they cut down the length of it. I think that was his answer. Yeah. Okay, so what they go into over here, now there's seemingly another question. The other question is, what do you mean you really could do? So that's the principle. You really could do all the whole Amidah for Shabbos. It's just for the week. It's just that for covered Shabbos, we want to lighten the load a little. Don't want to put you out. So the other question to ask is, hold on a second. There's another reason why we shouldn't say the weekday Amidah, and that's because we don't make personal requests on Shabbos. For example, we shouldn't really do the prayer for the sick on Shabbos. Right, and there's a number of such prayers that we either don't do or we do but we shouldn't do, and then that's because we don't make personal requests. So how do we explain that? So they go into that in the Dirshu notes over here, and they say that since this is like a set formula, it's not considered that you are asking for your own needs on Shabbos. And it's the same with Rachem and benching, right? Rachem Hashem Elokeinu, please Hashem have compassion, right? Isn't that asking for what we want? That's part of the formula. Harachamani shlach lanu, Hashem, please. Isn't that Anta Rachamans? So all of those, they said, look, since that's all become a set part of the davening, it's not considered. So we're talking about like spontaneous personal requests or, individually composed personal requests. That's the problem of asking on Shabbos. What about spiritual things? So they say, Rav Elyashiv said you are allowed to ask for spiritual things on Shabbos. In other words, you want to ask Hashem, please help me understand the Torah better, or those kinds of things. He said that you are allowed to. However, Rav Kanievsky says that you're not allowed to ask for spiritual things on Shabbos. So it's machloket. Okay. So that's what you do. Whichever bracha you were saying when you realized your mistake, you stop, and at that point you go back to the bracha that you started on. And that applies to Shacharit, Musaf, and Mincha. However, some say that at Musaf, you don't finish the bracha that you're on. You stop wherever you are, and you go back. So why is it that the others you would conclude your bracha, and at Musaf you wouldn't? That's because with the others, as we said, in principle, you could say the weekday Amidah. So to say the weekday Amidah is not out of place. But Musaf's going to do the weekday Amidah. It's not appropriate to say the weekday Amidah at that point. The other opinion says, look, even if you would, it really would be okay. So he just says, Yesh Omrim, some say. And the Shulchan Aruch doesn't rule either way. But the Mishna Brura says the consensus amongst the later halachic authorities is that in Musaf, if you do start doing the weekly Amidah, you stop wherever you are and you go back. But Shachar Mincha Mariv, you'll finish your bracha and then go back. Good. Next halacha. If you thought that it was the week and you started davening, again, thinking it was the week, and then when you said the word atah, so Baruch Atah Hashem Akel HaKadosh, atah, and you're about to say chonein la'adam da'at, say atah, and then you remember. So that's considered that you started saying atah chonein. Because from the beginning, you had in mind that you were saying atah chonein, and you thought it was week and whatever else, so that you're going to finish it. However, if you knew that it was Shabbos, but you by mistake started saying atah like you were going to say atah chonein, you can carry on with the Shabbos Amidah. Now, the reason for that is because Friday night, after Akel HaKadosh, it says, Atah Kidashta. It starts with Atah. So if somebody were listening to you and they heard you say Atah, it's not apparent at all that you said the wrong thing. If you had in mind from the beginning that you're saying Atah Chonein, so then intrinsically you have said the wrong thing. But if you knew that it was Shabbos, just the wrong word kind of slipped out of your mouth, but all you said was Atah, so it's not the wrong word.
Yeah.
So you can carry on. Mincha, same story. Atah echad v'shimcha echad. So you said Atah? No problem, not a deal breaker. Say atah, that's weekday, right? That's atah chonein, that's not Yismach Moshe. But you can make an excuse. You can say, I wasn't saying atah for atah chonein, I was saying atah for atah kidashta or atah echad. It was a Shabbos atah, it wasn't a weekday atah. In other words, again, the point is, you knew it was Shabbos. You said the word atah by mistake. Is that de facto a weekday utterance? And the answer is no. Atah chonein is a weekday utterance, but atah is not. Even at shacharit, it could be another one of the Shabbos Amidas, and therefore that's fine. And you just stop. You say atah, Yismach Moshe. Okay. In fact, the Shulchan Aruch Nasi in the Ramoi takes it even a step further. It's not just that it could be that you got mixed up with shacharit or with Mariv or with Musaf, Mincha. You actually could say that Amidah if you wanted. During the week, the brachot of the Amidah are always the same, Shachar and Mincha Mariv. So on Shabbos, it's true we give different brachot during Amidah, but any one of those is a valid Shachar Mincha Mariv Amidah, and therefore you could actually say that. That's what he says. That's a better answer. Haven't heard of somebody actually doing that, right? You could do, again, in theory, the Mincha Amidat Mariv, the Mariv Amidat Shacharit, the Shacharit Amidat Mincha. In theory, you could do that. We don't do that, but in theory, it seems that you could, and it would fulfill your obligation. Halacha number 4. If you did the whole Amidah, and you didn't do anything for Shabbos, it was all the weekday Amidah, then you haven't fulfilled your obligation, because then you've missed out. And if you mentioned Shabbos within the Amidah, then you have fulfilled your obligation. So, like, for example, somebody get a bit confused. They do the weekday Amidah, and then they do like a Yalev Yavo, Yom HaShabbat Hazeh. Even though that isn't correct what they did, they're supposed to do that, they have fulfilled their obligation, because the main thing is you have to mention Shabbos in your Amidah. If you did it in the proper way with the proper Shabbos, wonderful. If you did it in a bit of a different way, okay, it's acceptable. If you missed it completely, then it's no good. With Musaf, similarly, if you did some other kind of Musaf, but as long as you said this phrase, we will fulfill before you our obligations with the daily offerings and the Korban Musaf. That's sufficient. That's the essence of the Musaf prayer. Hashem, we remember the Musaf offerings and we long to be able to fulfill them again together with all the daily offerings. That's the Musaf prayer. So that's what you say. That's what you can do. So it's interesting as well to see the technical requirement for the prayer as opposed to the established formulation. The established formulation is far more elaborate than the technical requirement. Technical requirement you can get away with just a couple of lines. Halakha number 5. Again, you made the mistake and you said the weekday Amidah, whole weekday Amidah, not Shabbos. If you started moving your feet back, you need to start the whole Amidah from the beginning. But if you haven't yet started moving your feet back, even if you concluded your Amidah, you go back to the point of Shabbos. So again, at what point do we say you have finished an invalid Amidah and now you must start a valid Amidah? At what point do we say you have started a valid Amidah, you've made some invalid stuff in the middle, but let's go back to a point and salvage it. That point at which it's still salvageable, in which you're still in the Amidah, is before you've moved your feet. Before you move your feet, you can always go back. Once you move your feet, it's over. You did it wrong, you've got to start again. Now he says, if you made a mistake, now this is now going into what we mentioned earlier. If you made a mistake and you said the wrong Shabbos Amidah, sitting in Marv, and I said the Shacharit one, you don't go back. In other words, even though I haven't finished the Amidah, I don't go back.
This is all premised on people saying this by heart.
That's the main thing, I think. You know, I mean, the halachot carry across to us with Sidurim, but it's far less likely for us to experience it than it was for them. Yeah, for them, absolutely. Especially, you know, you're in the little dorp and whatever. Yeah. So that's part of the reason. In fact, that's the main reason why you have a lot of the different tunes. You have some people that they're very strict. Somebody will do like a Kaddish before the Amidah. That's it. It's the wrong Kaddish. That's the Kaddish for Rosh Chodesh. You must do the Kaddish for Shabbos. You must do, what's the difference? The difference is when people hear that tune, it prompts them to say the right words in the Amidah. So yeah, that's the idea of those associations, to help you in exactly that way. So
you've got the repetition of the Amidah.
Yes.
Salvage a wrong one.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. In fact, Rabbi Goldfein used to give us that as practical advice every year. When we change over from, you know, the prayer for rain, we start doing it, we stop doing it, whatever else. So he would always say to us, you try to get it right, whatever else, and if you realize you made a mistake, you're going to correct it. But if you finished your Amidah and you realize you did something wrong, then what you do is you listen to every word of the repetition of the Amidah, answer a man, you have in mind that he fulfills your obligation. And a couple of times he told us that once he gave that shiur, and somebody came back to him and said, my rabbi said that's correct, but you have to go and ask the Shaliach Tzibur to have you in mind when he does his repetition.
But isn't this what the repetition is for in the
So
first place?
Rabbi Goldman said, but that's what the repetition is for in the first place. So this guy said, in the name of his rabbi, yeah, but not everyone davening knows that. Somebody goes up to daven, they're just doing what's in the Siddur. They don't know that they're davening on behalf of people. So therefore you need to come and say, Bhagavan says, when a guy goes up to daven, he's there to do whatever, that's what it's in mind, whatever this is supposed to do. That he doesn't have a limit his intention to only want to achieve X, Y, Z. I want to do whatever this prayer is supposed to do. He says that would cover it. So he opposed that proposal that you'd have to talk to the ask the Shliach Tzibur to have you in mind. So yeah, Rabbi Goldman tells that as a practical matter. If you mess up your Amidah, you rely on and you finished it, you rely on the repetition of Amidah. Where that comes in, though, you got to be a bit of a faster davener. If you're slower, then if he's already started, then you missed it. Then you got to do Ein Run again. Okay, so if you said the wrong Shabbos Amidah, you don't have to go back. That's fine. If you remember, the Mishnah Brura adds in, but if you remember in the middle of your bracha, so then rather go back. In other words, I'm halfway through the Mariv bracha, just go back to the Shacharit bracha, if that's what I'm really in. Some say that when it comes to Musaf, that's a different story. Again, so the Musaf prayer at Mariv prayer Musaf. Shacharit Mincha Mariv, that's one thing. Musaf is another thing. They're two different systems, and they can't really replace or substitute for one another. Number 7, we go back to Vayachulu. Why? Why do we say Vayachulu? We all say Vayachulu after the Amidah. Now we've all just said Vayachulu and the Amidah. Why should we say Vayachulu after the Amidah? The answer is that when it's Shabbos and Yontif together, the Amidah does not contain Vayachulu. And it's still, we want to say Vayachulu on Shabbos. That's true. When it's Shabbos and Yontif, we can't say Vayachulu in the Amidah for whatever reason. It's not clear to me what that reason is. When it's Shabbos and Yontif, we don't say Vayachulu in the Amidah, but we don't want you to forget Vayachulu. So for Shabbos and Yontif, we all say Vayachulu after the Amidah. But now Vayachulu is only for a Shabbos that falls on Yontif, people are going to forget it. So therefore we said, let's do Vayachulu every single Shabbos. We'll never forget it. And we'll do it on Shabbos Yontif as well when you don't say it in your personal Amidah. So it's a redundancy. That's an intentional redundancy for Shabbos Yontif. Okay. Another reason, he says, is to fulfill the obligation for somebody who doesn't know how to daven. And the truth is, I always thought, it used to be that people didn't have Siddurim and didn't know how to daven. Today we've got Siddurim, everyone knows how to daven. The truth is, there are a lot of people who don't really daven. But the fact that we all say Vayachulu together, so they'll do that, they'll be a part of that. So that, I think the original intention is still fulfilled today through that. Then he says, we say Vayachulu in a loud voice, and we say it standing. Why do we stand? Because through this we are testifying that Hashem created the world, and the rule is that a testimony must be given standing. It is good to say it together with a community, because we want a full community to testify to Hashem, but at least it should be 2 people. If somebody's davening by themselves, some say they don't have to go back to Vayachulu. It's davening at home. You don't have to say Vayachulu afterwards, because you aren't giving testimony. You've said it in your Amidah and you aren't giving testimony. And some say, no, I should also do it, but I don't need to stand up. Mishna Brura says he thinks it's better if an individual will still do it, but don't do it as testimony. Do it like you're saying the Vayachulu. Okay. Then there's a discussion when we do it at Kiddush time. Should we be standing or sitting? Should we view that also as testimony or not? Mishna Brura says the custom is that we stand. Now, here's an interesting one that he says we should have a full community to testify to Hashem, and at least it should be 2 people. So the question is, well, what if you daven slower than everyone else? This was something that always used to come up. Back in my days, before I was a community rabbi, especially at Yeshiva, we daven far more slowly than they daven in shuls. Every year when I go back to Yeshiva, I daven the Amidah, and I feel like I've got to wait like an hour and a half for everyone else to finish. And by the time I leave, I'm davening the Amidah at the same pace as Yeshiva. And I come back to shul, and it's like, I'm not even halfway through, and they're already finished. So you have these different pacings. Now, if you're in yeshiva and you go for a Shabbos off, so that Friday night, you're going to be way behind everyone else when they finish their Amidah. So the question always came up. They all said Vayechulu while I was still davening Amidah. I've now finished. Should I find a partner to say Vayechulu with? Because we have this idea that you're giving testimony to Hashem and the community's doing it together. It's correct to do it together with the community, but at least it should be two. Now, there's two ways to read this. One is to say the community should do it together. It shouldn't just be a thing where everyone does it by themselves. It should be we do it all together, like we do in shuls. What if you don't have a minyan? You got 8 people doing everything together, or 3 people davening together. It still is a good thing that 2 people or more should come together to say it. That's it. But it's not necessarily saying that if you missed out with the community that you should make it up by coming together. Or maybe that's exactly what it's saying. That if you didn't do it together with everyone, you should make sure to do it at least with 2 of you. Now, I'll ask this question to Rabbi Dov Tanzer. Do you know the Rabbi's Tanzer? So I asked this question to Rabbi Dov Tanzer when I was still in yeshiva, walking somewhere with him. Somebody said, I can ask him questions. You know, he's a real Talmid Chacham. So I went to ask him this question. Do I say it together with people or whatever else? So he said the Chazon Ish said it's not necessary. So for the rest of my life, I never worried about it. The Chazon Ish says it's not necessary. That's what Rabbi Tanzer said. So here they've got the notes. Chazon Ish says, it seems you do not need to make the effort to say it with 2 people, because it seems we should be concerned that it seems like you are setting up witnesses for the act of creation. I'm not sure exactly what that means. And he adds there that it's possible that you don't even need to say it together in a loud voice and everything. So in other words, the Mishna Brura is quite straight that this is like testimony and we should do it together. And the Chazon says, no, it's not so much testimony. He didn't feel that was necessary or even praiseworthy. And then there's a whole question. Should a woman say Vayechulu? She can't give testimony. So, how does that fit in? So he says, she should certainly say Vayechulu. Whether she should have it in mind as testimony or not, okay, that's a discussion. But certainly women should say Vayechulu as well. It's no problem. But that's the point, is that from the Mishna Brura, you could make a case that you should make sure to say with 2, and you'll often see yeshiva guys doing that. Exactly what I've described to you. They daven slower than everyone else. When it's finished, they'll find someone and they'll say Vayechulu together. But the Chazon Ish said that isn't necessary. Okay. Halacha number 8. After the Amidah, the Shelach Tzibur says the bracha achat ma'in sheva, the one bracha like 7. That's Magen Avot, Bidvaro, Machayim Etim. An individual doesn't say it. However, as the Ramor, if the individual wants to be strict, he can say it without the brachas at the beginning and end. Just that paragraph of Magen Avot. And that, in fact, is what the community does. They say it with the Shliach Tzibur, without the beginning and end. In other words, Shliach Tzibur says the first paragraph, community and Shliach Tzibur say the second, Shliach Tzibur says the third. Now, the question here is, so firstly, what is this bracha? Where does it all come from?
Repeat it, don't we?
That's the next point I'm going to get to. So that's going to be point number 2. So point number 1 is, why do we say it at all? So what he says is,
Summary, isn't it?
yes. So is it as well as or instead of? He says, the Mishnah Berurah says this was instituted because of danger. Their shuls were all in fields, and sometimes people would come late, and you would have some individuals left davening alone, and so therefore they instituted that the Shalech Tzibur should say this so that everyone would have a chance to finish, and we'd all go home together. In other words, it was a buffer. This is a prayer buffer so that everyone can finish. It's not necessary today? Okay, but we keep it anyway. Once it was instituted, we keep it anyway. That's what he says. You just see, so there's a Jewish notes. I want to see if they add anything. But the next question is what you asked. Do you say this together, or do you say this consecutively? So this is what the Mishnah Brura says. The main institution was that the Shliach Tzibur should say it. Therefore, it seems obvious that what they do in some places, the Shliach Tzibur starts the bracha out loud and then does it quietly while the community does it out loud is not correct. Rather, after the community has finished it, he should then say Magen Avot in a loud voice. So that's the way that we do it, is based on what the Mishnah Brura says is correct. They mention here in the Dirshu notes that in Yerushalayim the minhag is the community doesn't say it at all. It's only the Shliach Tzibur. Now, if you look in the art scroll where they have these pages, so it's on page 346. It says, you got the first one, Chazan continues, then it says congregation, comma, then Chazan. So that's, again, according to the Mishnah Brura. In Yeshiva, the big siddur that we daven from had the word then crossed out, and it had the word and written on top. To me, and that's how we used to do it. We would do it all together. So, why would Rabbi Goldfein, might not be Rabbi Goldfein, I wrote that. Why would he do that? It seems that was probably the Lithuanian custom. Now, I understand the concern that the Shliach Tzibur is going to end up saying it quietly and everyone says it out loud and you don't hear him saying it. But we have the exact same concern with Modim. When you have the repetition of the Amidah, and I actually wrote a note on that stender at the front there, that what a lot of people do with Modim is that Chazan gets the repetition of the Amidah, Modim, he starts whispering. So everyone does the Modim D'Rabbanan. It's completely incorrect. If you're the guy who messed up your Amidah and you need to hear his Amidah, you can't hear it anymore. You're now actually haven't fulfilled your obligation. You haven't had a repetition of the Amidah. He needs to do the whole thing out loud. And I discussed that with Rabbi Goldfein once. And he said, yeah, absolutely. Obviously, he needs to do the whole thing out loud. So he needs to do it out loud the same way he's done the rest of it out loud. It's just that everyone else, okay, so they say it at the same time, but they must say it quietly enough that his voice can still be heard.
But I thought Modim was, you can't outsource thanks.
Yes.
Where did I hear that? Recently I read it somewhere.
Yes. It's in, is it in an Anit Tefillah Shabbos Siddur?
No, I don't know where.
One of the
reason why you say something.
Yes.
Because you can't benefit from someone else's saying thanks on your behalf. Thank you. You've got to say you got to say for yourself.
It's true, and that's why we do say it. But at the end of the day, it still has the status of, that can explain our obligation to also say it. But it explains our obligation to also say it. But why? But the halachic fact is that this is still part of the repetition of Amidah. Yeah. So in there, which is more important, we trust, and I admit, perhaps erroneously, we trust that even though they're saying it together, the Shliach Tzibur is still going to be able to fulfill the community's obligation. I don't see Magen Avot as being less than that. Whichever way you want to say it, less or more, right? I don't see it as being different. If we trust that for the Modim and the repetition of Amidah, even though we're both saying stuff together, we will hear the Shliach Tzibur and fulfill our obligation with him. So too with Magen Avot. So when I daven on a Mariv, especially if I feel like we need to make up a little bit of time, if on Shabbos, you don't change the bracha of Magen Avot and all of that. I beg your pardon. Thank you. You don't. Let me just see what they've got in the Siddur. Yeah, even though it's Yontif, you answer Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh has Shabbat Yisrael v'Hazmanim, like we do in other brachot. We don't add anything for Yontif in this one. It's only a Shabbos bracha. Why is that? because it was instituted for Shabbos. And even on Shabbos, it's not really an integral part of the service. It was a buffer. So this was not, it was not instituted with nuance and that it should become an integral part of the service to be, it was put in as an extra Shabbos prayer. That's how it is. Okay. Then he says, we don't say it in a Sheva Brachot house or in a Shiva house, because this reason of people coming late and whatever else doesn't apply. It's a small group. When you're just dealing with a small group, so then it's not. Then we don't have to institute a buffer prayer. We all know one another and who's coming and whatever else. And the Mishna Brura adds here, certainly you wouldn't say this with like an occasional minyan, but if there's a set minyan, even if this is going to be, Monday night, Wednesday night, Friday night, we have a minyan. So that's considered a set minyan. Those nights, whatever else. So in a set minyan, then we're going to say it, but in an occasional minyan, we're not going to say it. Mark Shapiro mentioned that they have in his neighborhood, there's somebody in the community who has a Kabbalat Shabbat for Marav at his house. Like, they've got the big shul quite far, and there's a bunch of them who live, all near one another. So every couple of weeks, they have their own Kabbalat Shabbat and Ma'ariv in one of the guys' homes. It works out that because they're quite a mobile community and one or two or three of them are always traveling, they don't have it every week. They have it like every second week. He says it works out to every second week that they have this minyan. So they never used to say Magen Avot, because he said it's an occasional minyan. We don't have it every week. We have it when we get together. But his son or son-in-law went to yeshiva and he asked the Rosh Yeshiva there, and they said, no, but you're having it regularly. It's not that, we're just here for the summer on holiday together, and so we'll do it over the next few weeks. You're having it regularly, all year round, year after year. So you're not having it every single week, but that's still considered regular enough, and therefore you would say it. That's an example of the application of that. Halacha number 11, even on Shabbos that falls right after Yontif, we still say this Magen Avot. So in other words, like 3 day, what we call 3 day Yontif. Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, you say it on that Shabbos as well. Even though we're not worried that people are coming from work, that's part of why, that's part of the buffer that's needed. Yeah. People coming from work, whatever, even though that's not a concern, still, again, it's instituted for Shabbos, we'll say it.
Well, why do we, when that happens, why do we interfere with Kabbalat Shabbat so much? Because it's cut down to like just the last two.
Yes, correct. My understanding is because the whole point of Kabbalat Shabbat is to bring in Shabbat, to welcome in Shabbat, to get us into this, to get us into Shabbat and Shabbat into us and all of that. It's all that preparation work for Shabbat. When you're coming in from Yom Tov, you don't need to prepare for Shabbat. It's a seamless transition. That's my understanding. I haven't seen that written. And you won't find it in Shulchan Aruch, right? Because it's newer.
By the time the Mishna Brura...
Yeah, it was that time. I don't know why the Mishna Brura doesn't write much about it. Yeah. Don't speak during Vayechulu, and don't speak during the Magen Avot. Why does he say that?
Shouldn't speak anytime.
Right? Correct. So why is he saying it now? So there's two reasons. Because people were speaking. Okay. But because people justified speaking. Whenever, this is my view, and it's not proven, but up until this point I think it's correct. Until I'm disproven, I think it's correct. Whenever the Shulchan Aruch says, don't speak during this part of the service, during that part of the service, he says it when it's not so problematic not to speak. He doesn't say don't speak in the middle of the Amidah, because obviously you don't speak in the middle of the Amidah. Don't speak in the middle of the Shema. Obviously you don't. But at times where halachically there isn't compelling reason not to speak, that's when he comes to tell you, still you shouldn't speak. So over here, you've finished the Amidah. Your halachic structure, which started from Baruch Hu, has ended with the end of the Amidah. You can't talk from the beginning of Baruch Hu. You've got all the brachot, you've got the Shema, you've got the brachot, you've got the Amidah. That set section, obviously you can't talk. Afterwards, Halachically, there's nothing kind of binding you in the system. You're not interrupting anything. You're not breaking any kind of sequence. Sequence has ended. So, therefore, people would say, so now I can speak if I want. He says, still you shouldn't. Even though there isn't such a halachic sequence, still shouldn't. Because they're busy davening, So I think that then it's really like the default. That's what you do. You should never be speaking in shul. Correct. But it's, to be speaking during the brachot of the Shema, it's not because you shouldn't be speaking in shul, it's because you're interrupting the middle of a sequence. Whereas over here, it's because, you shouldn't be speaking in shul. Okay. If you davened the week to Amidah and you didn't mention Shabbos, like we mentioned, we made the mistake, or you didn't daven at all, but you heard the whole bracha of Magen Avot, does that fulfill your Amidah obligation? The answer is yes. Yes, because ultimately it is an abridged version of the Amidah, and it does serve that purpose. Very interesting. Next chapter, 269. Kiddush in shul. We have the custom of making kiddush in shul. The one who makes kiddush should not drink the wine, rather he should give it to a child. Because the main reason for kiddush, or the kiddush only works when you are having a meal in that place. Okay, so as we've seen, discussed, heard, right, there's no such thing as just kiddush. There's kiddush with a meal. You can't have a meal without kiddush. And kiddush without a meal doesn't mean anything. It's got to be kiddush and a meal. Because in shul we're doing kiddush without a meal, it's not a kiddush. So it's not a kiddush. You can't drink the wine. So you give it to a child to drink. Okay. Now, a few questions over here, of course.
Why are we doing it in the first place?
So why are we doing it in the first place? So that's the Shulchan Aruch is going to address. Number two, if you shouldn't drink the wine, why should you get a child to drink the wine? The general rule of chinuch is we encourage children to do what they will do as adults. Not we have two separate sets of rules. So why must the wine be drunk? Okay, so why do we do it in the first place? The Shulchan Aruch continues. The whole reason this was established was because of visitors and those who are going to eat in shul so that they fulfill their obligation. In other words, the way it would work was wayfarers would come, there was no hotel, they brought their food, but they weren't able to bring a bottle of wine with them or whatever else. And by us making kiddush in shul, after shul, we would all leave, they would stay there and eat supper, and they wouldn't be able to make kiddush for themselves. So then we decided we'll make kiddush for them before we leave, and they are doing it as part of their meal. So they would drink the wine, and right after Yigdal, right, they didn't have Yigdal in those days, but let's say, right after Yigdal, they would make hamotzi and eat and whatever. Nowadays, we don't have wayfarers staying over and eating in shul and all of that. But again, we had this institution to make kiddush in shul, and we've kept it. Tradition. However, he says, it would be better not to make kiddush in shul. And that's the custom of Israel. You go to a Sephardi shul in Israel today, they don't make kiddush in shul. And in fact, I stand to be corrected, Sephardi shuls generally don't do it. Because they say, it's no longer relevant. It's not instituted as something for all future generations that we have to do it. It was done in response to a need at the time. The need doesn't exist. We shouldn't make kiddush anymore. So they don't. Us Ashkenazim, we still do. Because that's what we do. And Ramo adds, the custom is to stand at the time that we make kiddush in shul. It's just interesting to see the way that he wins that. Again, you ask a traditional Jew, so like how important is it to stand during kiddush? Of course you have to stand during kiddush. It's like that's obviously what you do. He just points out it's the custom to do it. It's not...
well, it's not the German custom.
In shul. We'll see about kiddush at your meal. Yeah, we'll see about kiddush at your meal. He's talking in shul, so he mentions it's the custom. It's not necessarily the most important thing. Okay. The Mishna Brura says, what do we do about this kiddush? Because he mentioned, some that maybe in Israel they don't or whatever. So the Mishna Brura says, in our countries, we do make kiddush on Shabbos, and on Yontif, with a couple of exceptions. We don't do it on Pesach. Okay. And he says we have a custom that the person who provides the wine to shul for Kiddush and Havdalah, this is a great honor, and people bid for the honor of providing wine to the shul for Kiddush and Havdalah. You're the wine man for the year. That's part of Yikum Purkan. We give a special bracha. Right? So the ones who give wine for Kiddush and Havdalah, that's one of the brachas. I once had somebody came to me and they said, Rabbi, I want to make a donation to the shul. However, I do not want this to go to the electricity account. I want this to go to a special project. I want you to think of something. I want you to tell me what you'd like to do, what you'd like to buy, what you'd like to put to, but not for the electricity. So I thought about this afterwards, and I thought, hold on a second. There's the special bracha that we say every Shabbos for people who light candles to the shul. That's what you like. That's what you're running down, and that's like the main donation. Yeah. That's the main donation to a shul, is to keep the electricity on. Yeah. So that's the point that he makes. Now, what is this deal of giving it to a child? Some say you should give it to a child who has not yet reached the age of chinuch, for exactly the reason that I said. Because if the idea is that this doesn't count as a kiddush, well, if it doesn't count as a kiddush, then the one making kiddush doesn't drink the wine, and you should teach children not to drink the wine either. So who do you give it to? You give it to a little kid who doesn't know any bit different. That's what some say. But the Magen Avraham says in the name of Poskim that it is permissible even to give it to a child who knows. Talking age 6 or 7, he says. Often children are younger. I mean, Elisha would understand they'll deal with Kiddush and whatever, On the contrary, he says if you'll only give it to a little child, then you've actually said a bracha levatala, because you haven't taught him the chinuch of the bracha. And this really is the key to understanding this. I'm going to call it a strange minhag, not because I want to be insulting to the minhag, but to point out that there's a contradiction over here. Yeah. On the one hand, you've said the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Borei Peri HaGafen. That bracha can't go to waste. Somebody's got to drink this wine. You've said the bracha for someone. But on the other hand, you've made a kiddush with no meal. You have to drink it, but you can't drink it. So what do you do when you have to drink it, but you can't drink it? You get a child to drink it, because it's now valid that I said a bracha on behalf of a child. Shalva wants to eat something, I can say the bracha for her. But the child is not prohibited from eating before kiddush, or from drinking without a kiddush, because they're still a child. So they can, even though. But then you have the secondary problem. So what about the fact that it's not good chinuch? Basically, so the one solution is to say, okay, so do what the child doesn't have chinuch. But you shouldn't be saying brachas for such a child. Yeah. It's not relevant. You should only be saying brachas for a child that needs brachas. So, therefore, what we're saying is the concern of bracha levatala, I've said a bracha on this wine, is more compelling than the concern of chinuch. However, I would add, we're going to finish the Mishna Brura in a second, but I would add, what it should be then is one child comes and takes one sip out of the cup. Zehu. Otherwise, we are actively teaching all the children to drink without kiddush. In fact, I think it's a little bizarre. I give out chocolates on a Friday night to all the children except those of bar and bat mitzvah age. And we all know, once you're bar mitzvah, you don't have it anymore. And sometimes one of the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah children will come and say to me, please can I have just this 1 week and give me a whole spiel about why it's so necessary. So I'll say, okay, or no, or okay, but you can only eat it after kiddush at home. So that's fine. Why? Because that's the halacha. They can only eat it after kiddush at home. But if that's the halacha we're teaching the bigger kids, we should teach that same halacha to little kids. Yeah. This custom that we've got to give all the kids grape juice and chocolate is poor chinuch. It's not proper chinuch because you're teaching them to eat without kiddush.
And it causes trouble because they don't eat their supper. At shuls that give those big chocolates.
Yeah.
That's a reason not to go to shul.
Really, hey?
Yeah.
You're saying every Friday night they get big chocolates?
Those proper big
No
slabs
way.
of chocolate.
To every kid every Friday night?
Yes.
That's very interesting. So now he goes on to say, he says, even though you're not allowed to give food to a child that's not kosher, here you're allowed to for several reasons, and the Magen Avraham goes into it. So I want to look at that Magen Avraham. You're not allowed to give food to a child that's not kosher. You're not allowed to. But here, surely it's the same thing. Let me start again. This is what he's asking. If I'm not allowed to give a child something forbidden, surely it's the same thing here. Says no. The Magen Avraham explains why it's different. I'd like to see that Magen Avraham. And so too on Shabbos, you're allowed to feed a child before Kiddush. Okay, so that's what he wants to say. We don't educate children not to eat before Kiddush. Okay, I want to take a look at that. The Achronim, the late halachic authorities say that if the child hasn't reached the age of really understanding shul, so then he should drink like revi'it, like 80 mils, because that will be like eating a meal. And then he should say the bracha achrona. And he should have in mind that he's now fulfilled his obligation of kid. Oh, if there's no child. If there's no child, then what do you do? If there's no child, then you yourself drink the wine. You drink a revi'it. And then that's considered a meal.
Kiddush, yeah.
Then it's considered proper kiddush. Now, I'll tell you when that came up once. And when you go home, if you make kiddush at home, you're only making kiddush then for your family, not for yourself, because you've already made kiddush. Now, I'll tell you where this came up. Aviva and I had an issue during winter. Aviva had to be here for CSO super early. And I had to be at shul. We weren't able to light candles at home. So the only place to light candles was here. But your candles have to be connected to your Shabbos meal. Can't light candles here and then just go home and eat at home. So we davened, we lit candles here. We davened, waited for her to finish her shift, came into the kitchen. By the light of our Shabbos candles which we lit, we made kiddush and we drank a revi'it of grape juice. And then we went home and had our motzi at home.
Yeah.
But we had kiddush and a mini meal here and at home. Okay. So the answer to my dilemma seems to be that we are not so concerned about chinuch when it comes to eating before kiddush, but that we're going to have to see further. Please, God will continue.
I didn't know the candles were connected to the meal.